He thought he knew everything about his company, but all it took was a stifled sob behind a kitchen door to change everything. What he discovered hit him harder than any financial crisis. Giacomo Rinaldi lived in the United States of America with his family, but he decided to return to Italy to start his restaurant business. Giacomo Rinaldi becomes CEO of a small chain of diners with 13 locations across Italy, had built his empire from scratch over the course of 10 years. Originally from Verona in Italy, Giacomo had always prided himself on the warm, family-like atmosphere he tried to instill in each location. But something wasn't right. In recent months, the complaints had increased. If you love true stories that shake your heart, subscribe to the channel now. There are so many to tell on this channel. Slow service, rude staff, increasingly dissatisfied customers. Official reports from regional managers spoke of a situation under control, but the rumors that reached him painted a very different picture. Frustrated and determined to discover the truth, Giacomo did something unexpected. He disguised himself and showed up incognito at one of his diners. He chose the one in Rimini, far enough from the headquarters that he wouldn't be recognized. He was wearing an old hoodie, faded jeans, thick-rimmed glasses, and a scruffy beard. No one would ever have thought that this man was the founder of the entire chain. He entered at lunchtime. The place was crowded, noisy, with a background noise of clashing dishes and crossed conversations. The room was clean but neglected, the seats worn, the atmosphere tired. A young waitress approached with a forced smile. The sign read, "Marta." "Hello, welcome. Do you want to start with something to drink?" she said, her voice polite but exhausted. "Just a coffee, please," Giacomo replied, taking a seat near the window. He immediately noticed the tiredness in the girl's eyes, her rapid, almost mechanical movements. Although she was clearly overworked, she never showed impatience with the customers. When she returned with the coffee, Giacomo ordered a hamburger and fries, but he was interrupted by a male voice booming from the kitchen. "Marta, always late, huh?" The voice belonged to a short, burly man with a stained apron and a grim look. Lorenzo, the shift supervisor. Marta jumped. She answered softly, her voice cracking. Giacomo felt a pang in his stomach. This was not the company he had built. Not like this. He continued to watch. The tensions in the air were becoming increasingly palpable. Behind the scenes, organizational chaos was intertwined with personal stories. In a corner of the kitchen, some employees exchanged worried glances, while others, with their heads down, tried to concentrate on the orders that had accumulated. In that whirlwind of dissatisfaction, Giacomo recognized faces that had once been full of pride, now consumed by fatigue and frustration. Spontaneous laughter and affectionate exchanges were replaced by tense silences and soft sighs. The human warmth that had once characterized his diners seemed to be slowly dying out, suffocated by an internal bureaucracy and hasty management. As he watched, Giacomo realized that the problem was not just a lack of staff or inadequate organization. It was a question of respect and dignity. The dedication of Marta, who had not dared to complain openly despite being overwhelmed by the workload, represented the beating heart of that now forgotten reality. The young waitress had always put the well-being of the customers first, sacrificing every little break to ensure that every detail was taken care of. Yet, the weight of the shouting and criticism seemed to have taken away every spark of that initial joy. Meanwhile, the customers, unaware of the drama unfolding behind the scenes, continued to sit and indulge in their habits, but with a look that increasingly betrayed a growing disappointment. The families who once found refuge in that welcoming warmth now limited themselves to conversing in low voices, almost as if they wanted to avoid further disturbing an already tense environment. When Marta returned with the hamburger, he apologized again. "You're doing a great job," Giacomo told her, trying to instill some comfort in that difficult moment. She looked surprised, then smiled softly at him, a smile that hid tiredness and resigned hope. It was at that precise moment that a stifled sob interrupted the buzz of the room. It came from the kitchen. It was Marta. "I'm doing my best. I haven't even had a break in 6 hours." The response was cold. "If you can't handle it, this job isn't for you." Giacomo couldn't stay seated. He stood up and approached the kitchen door. Marta was crying while Lorenzo stood over her, threatening and implacable. No one spoke. Giacomo spoke up. "Is there a problem here?" His tone was calm but firm, and for the first time that day, the air seemed to have stiffened in anticipation of an answer. Lorenzo turned around, visibly annoyed. "No, everything under control." "Then why don't you let Marta take 5 minutes? We're understaffed, no breaks. There's always time to treat people with respect." A young cook, Andrea, timidly intervened. Marta didn't even stop for a drink. Lorenzo glared at him. "And you think about your station." But by now the air had changed, become electric and charged with a tension that could no longer be ignored. The next day, Giacomo returned. Same disguise, new determination. Marta was already in the dining room, more tired than the day before, her eyes betraying the weight of sleepless nights and constant worries. Andrea was in the kitchen, trying to maintain an impossible balance between the incessant requests and the little time available. Lorenzo was still absent, an absence that spoke louder than 1,000 accusations. Giacomo stopped to ask her what it was like to work there. "It's not just the workload. When things go wrong, it's always our fault. Lorenzo yells, he gets angry. He makes us feel useless." Giacomo nodded, realizing that the root of the problem was a corporate culture corroded by pressure and disregard for the well-being of the staff. It was time to intervene decisively. When Lorenzo entered, the atmosphere became tense like the air before a storm. It took only a few minutes before another conflict broke out, this time with an elderly customer who had dared to express a criticism about the service. Marta tried to handle the situation with her usual kindness, but Lorenzo intervened by shouting, fueling the fire of a contagious anger. It was then that Giacomo stood up and calmly took out his company badge. "I'm Giacomo Rinaldi. I own this diner, and you are fired." The silence that fell in the room was unreal, as if each word weighed hundreds of pounds. After speaking with the staff, he thanked Marta and Andrea for their integrity and for the courage to be themselves in an environment that had forgotten the value of human dignity. He told them that he would make sure that the company culture would return to what it once was, where every single employee was respected and valued. That day marked the beginning of a new era. When the lights went down, Giacomo sat down with them to listen to their stories, their struggles, and their hopes. He told his story, admitting that he had strayed too far from the true essence of his work. But now he was back, determined to restore dignity and respect to those who contributed every day, even in silence, to the success of his dream. A few weeks later, the Rimini cafeteria had a new shift manager. Marta had been promoted to dining room coordinator, and Andrea to kitchen manager. The atmosphere had changed. Giacomo's words had opened a breach in an already oppressive system. Customers began to smile again, and employees began to believe again in a fairer and more humane future. Giacomo continued his journey, one diner at a time, ready to expose hidden truths and bring the heart back to where it all began. Between the tables, behind the counter, and above all, among the people who every day give meaning to a story made of courage, dignity, and rebirth. Giacomo never returned to that place as a mystery customer. But every time he entered, he found serene faces, real smiles, and that warmth that he had once dreamed of building. He had learned a lesson that no balance sheet could have taught him. Dignity is not measured in turnover. but in the gaze of those who give their best every day, even when no one is looking. And from that day on, he swore to himself that he would never again let silence extinguish the value of the people who kept his dream alive. A small gesture for a message that can reach far. If this story touched you, please like and share it with someone who needs a reminder of how much it means to be treated with respect.